Could you teach the concepts in physics like a recipe to cook? Yeah. Okay, so here's my. You follow my main, you know, I say main, but it has like 50 followers. You follow my main Twitter. You see that I'm still a cook. I've talked on here before that I still cook. Um, so I often get people who talk about, you know, want to make the analogy about how cooking and physics are so much alike. Um, okay, so the methods for cooking are the same as they are for physics. Okay, you have some sort of prescription you follow. You change the variables based on your situation. So, like I don't in cooking you don't ever really follow recipes too much. It's more of a prescription method. So it's like you have a prescription that you follow, and you follow that prescription. And you change it, on the fly as you go, and you get better at fixing things and making things different and taste better and look different and look better and all this other stuff. Okay, so cooking is a lot like physics in that regard. Yes, you have prescriptions that you follow and you do things. Well, cooking has the physical domain, and physics has the mental domain. Like, there's not. I couldn't tell you which I get more exhausted doing. They're both equally exhausting, but physics is incredibly exhausting in my brain. Like, I just get after working on like a difficult theory. Like, if I were to sit there and pound through Shred Nikki for 4 hours, which I've done before, and just work on concepts from start to finish, then I get exhausted, like really exhausted. Yeah, I would say they're very much equally exhausting. But if I were to cook on a line and serve, like, it depends on how many people I have on the line. Like, I'll just make an analogy of the line that I've worked on before. If I were to do 4-hour service and with 4 people serve 300 people, then that's just, it's brutalizing to my body. And also can be to the mind too. Like, it depends on the resources I have. Like, if I have really bad resources, then it could be brutal on my mentality as well. So cooking is a lot like physics in the fact that you just like you sit down, you take a prescription, you sit down and you do it. Is it healthy for me? Not. It wasn't like cooking wasn't healthy for me at all, and I was in a really lot of bad situations when I was cooking. A lot of restaurants where like cooking was dangerous to my mentality, and it wasn't just me. It was like a lot of my coworkers too, because it was a very unhealthy work environment. And physics is this, it's really like so similar in that regard, where there's a lot of situations where it's a very unhealthy working environment. But I would say probably the biggest difference is that I feel exhausted in different ways. For cooking, in order to like make ends meet, you had to work like 60 to 70 hours a week. And it was just like, sometimes it was just so brutal. I mean, I remember like waking up day after day of just being completely exhausted from cooking, and like waking up that way, exhausted and painful, and then going to work, and the first 2 hours of my day are just sore, painful, and exhausting, and then afterwards would, I would start to feel better as the day went on, and then towards the end of the, this is just like, this one's called Andromeda Skies. It's like smooth jazz. I don't know, can you guys hear music? Talking about smooth jazz. I don't know if you can hear it even. I don't know what's a good height. But yeah, so cooking was incredibly exhausting physically, and there was times where it was incredibly exhausting mentally, and physics is always exhausting mentally. And I'm not sure which is harder to deal with. Probably days where I have to do both is the hardest thing. There was like some time in December where I was working in a restaurant that was busy enough to be in comparison with some of the busier places that I've worked. And there were some rough days in December because of that. Like, I would have to work in the morning for like 5 hours, and it could be like, depending on what I did that morning, it would be exhausting, and then have to go to a restaurant and work and serve 300 people with four cooks, and it was brutalizing. Honestly, cooks are remarkable people, and chefs and the same guys. The other part, okay, so the next part of that, I guess your real question. Okay, I gotta turn it down my ears a little bit. I like this jazz music, but jeez, it's like right there in my eardrum. Okay, the next part of that was, what about creative freedoms between the two, And it's really very similar in this. Oh, nice. Hi there, Jalen. I'll take a look at that in a second. It was really nice when essay called Cocktails in Classrooms or something along the lines, and I assumed it was explaining a concept using a cocktail or vice versa, but it was just a lecture in a bar. Lectures in a bar are nice. I mean, don't get me wrong. But so the creativity aspect is the same thing. Like, you take bits and pieces in cooking. You take bits and pieces. Okay, so you take bits and pieces of things and then you combine them in a different way to get something new. And that's the same thing you do in cooking, same thing you do in physics. It's like physics, I might take a concept here, a concept there, a problem here, and then try to apply some concepts to the problem. In cooking, I might do the opposite. Take a few things I know. Like, you kind of follow like a format where you have like a protein, a starch, a veggie, and then like you take that protein, you want a nice sauce for the protein, so then like you think of all of the combinations you can and apply things you know, don't know, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, so they're very similar in that regard, but obviously physics has a lot of science, or cooking has a lot of science involved in general. So like a lot of cooks are kind of interested in science just kind of inherently because they see things all the time and they're just curious about it. But yeah, I don't know if that's really what you were asking me, but that's kind of like, I get that a lot, like people trying to compare my time as a chef with my time as a physicist, and it's comparable, but they feel very, very different.